Karen didn't like my blue pool cover. While I was away, she brought bulldozers to my backyard. She filled my beautiful pool with mud and trash. What she didn't know: destroying a $40,000 pool is a serious felony. Now she's facing jail time and massive fines. Before watching full video, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more videos. I still remember the day I moved into Sunshine Meadows. It was a perfect spring morning, birds chirping, sun shining, and the real estate agent handing me the keys with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Congratulations, Mr. Roberts. Just remember, the HOA here is particular." She emphasized the last word in a way that should have been my first warning. I brushed it off. After 15 years in a cramped apartment, this modest 3-bedroom home with a backyard pool was my dream come true. I'd saved for years, working overtime at the hardware store to afford it. The sparkling blue pool was the main selling point, a place where I could relax after long shifts. I hadn't even finished unpacking when the doorbell rang. There stood a woman with perfectly highlighted blonde hair cut in what I'd later learn was called the "I want to speak to your manager" style. She wore designer yoga pants and a tight smile. "Hello, I'm Karen Hutchinson, president of the Sunshine Meadows Homeowners Association." She thrust a thick binder toward me. "Our community guidelines. Please review them immediately." I tried to be friendly. "Nice to meet you. I'm Jim Roberts. I'm really excited too." "Your mailbox is the wrong shade of beige," she interrupted, pointing to my mailbox. "Community standards require sandstone beige, not desert beige. You'll need to repaint it within 7 days or face a fine." I blinked, confused. But it came with the house? The previous owners had an exemption due to medical reasons. "You don't." "7 days, Mr. Roberts." She turned and walked away, leaving me holding the binder that must have weighed 5 pounds. That was just the beginning. Over the next month, I received notices about my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, my garbage cans being visible from the street for 20 minutes after collection, and apparently having the wrong type of border plants. Non-native species are strictly prohibited. I tried to comply. I really did. I repainted the mailbox. I bought a tape measure to check my grass height. I set alarms to bring in my garbage cans. But it was never enough. The real trouble started when I decided to host a small barbecue for some coworkers. It was a Saturday afternoon, completely within the acceptable hours for moderate social gatherings, listed on page 37 of the guidelines. Karen showed up at 6:15 p.m. "Your guest vehicles are parked facing the wrong direction according to section 4.3 of." "They're leaving in an hour," I said, trying to keep my cool. "And there's nothing in the guidelines about parking direction." Her eyes narrowed. "I'll have to bring this up at the next board meeting. And your pool cover doesn't match the approved color palette." I looked at my perfectly normal blue pool cover. The guidelines only specify that pools must be covered when not in use. There's no color requirement. "There will be," she snapped before marching away. 2 weeks later, I received a notice that pool covers must now be nautical navy or ocean azure only. My cover was apparently unauthorized aquamarine. The harassment continued for 3 months. Citations for bird feeders, wind chimes, and once 4 excessive garden gnome presents. I had exactly 1 gnome. Then came the weekend that changed everything. I had to visit my mother, who was recovering from surgery in another state. I'd be gone for 3 days. I secured everything according to guidelines, covered the pool, set timers for lights, arranged for a neighbor to collect any packages. When I returned on Monday evening, something felt wrong as soon as I pulled into the driveway. The backyard floodlight was on, which I hadn't left on. I walked through the house and opened the back door to a sight that made my stomach drop. My beautiful pool was gone. In its place was a pit filled with mud, concrete chunks, and construction debris. The pool deck was cracked and covered in dirt. Yellow caution tape surrounded the area. I called the police immediately. Officer Davis arrived within 20 minutes, took one look at the disaster, and let out a low whistle. "Who did this?" he asked, taking photos. "I have no idea," I said, still in shock. "I was out of town for the weekend." That's when my neighbor Jeff rushed over from next door. "Jim? Man, I tried calling you all weekend. That HOA lady brought a construction crew on Saturday morning. Said your pool violated some new ordinance and had to be removed. I told them they couldn't do that, but she had papers and said she'd call the police if anyone interfered." Officer Davis's expression changed. "She authorized this without your permission?" "I never received any notice," I said, feeling sick. "This pool was worth at least $40,000. "Well, sir," Officer Davis said grimly, "that makes it felony destruction of property. And looking at that debris. He pointed to some oil-slicked water in the mud pit. That's potentially an environmental crime too. The investigation moved quickly after that. Security footage from Jeff's doorbell camera showed Karen directing a construction crew to destroy my pool. She had forged documents claiming to have homeowner authorization. The construction company she hired wasn't even licensed and had dumped hazardous materials into my yard. That added environmental violations to the growing list of charges. 2 days later, I was making coffee when I heard the commotion outside. I stepped onto my porch to see Karen being led to a police car in handcuffs, screaming about her rights and HOA authority. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked. "I was enforcing community standards." "Ma'am," Officer Davis said calmly, "destroying private property worth over $20,000 is a Class 2 felony. The environmental violations add additional charges." Her face went pale. "But I'm the HOA president." "That doesn't give you the right to destroy someone's property," he replied, helping her into the back seat. The neighborhood came alive after Karen's arrest. Suddenly, neighbors I'd barely spoken to were bringing casseroles and offering support. They had stories, so many stories, about Karen's reign of terror. "She had my dog taken to the pound because his bark was disruptively pitched," said Mrs. Gonzalez from across the street. "She fined me $500 because my Christmas lights were excessively festive," added Mr. Peterson. It turned out Karen had been bullying the neighborhood for years, using the HOA as her personal weapon. Most residents were too afraid of her connections with local officials to fight back. But she hadn't counted on me. What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that before working at the hardware store I'd been a paralegal at an environmental law firm. I'd left the high-stress job after a minor heart attack, but I still had connections. I called my old boss, Maria, who now ran her own practice specializing in property disputes. "Jim Roberts. How's retirement treating you?" she asked cheerfully. "Not great, Maria. I could use your help." I explained the situation. There was a pause, then Maria burst out laughing. "She destroyed your pool because the cover was the wrong shade of blue? And contaminated your property with construction waste? Oh, Jim, this is the easiest case I'll take all year." We filed suits against Karen personally, the HOA for failing to supervise her actions, and the construction company for illegal dumping. I also contacted the district attorney about the criminal charges. The HOA board immediately distanced themselves from Karen, claiming she had acted without their knowledge or approval. They offered to cover the full restoration of my pool and property to avoid being included in the lawsuit. Karen's criminal trial came first. I'll never forget her face when she walked into the courtroom and saw me sitting calmly beside Maria. "The defendant will please rise," said Judge Watkins, a stern woman with no patience for nonsense. Karen stood, wearing a conservative outfit that couldn't hide her nervousness. "Mrs. Hutchinson, you are charged with felony destruction of property, forgery, fraud, and environmental violations. How do you plead?" "Not guilty by reason of HOA authority," Karen replied. Judge Watkins peered over her glasses. "That is not a recognized legal defense, Mrs. Hutchinson." The trial was surprisingly short. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, testimony from the construction workers who said Karen had insisted the job be done quickly over the weekend, and documentation of the environmental damage. The most entertaining moment came during Karen's testimony. "Mr. Roberts wasn't maintaining his pool according to standards," she insisted. "The cover was the wrong color." "So you decided to destroy a $40,000 pool because of the cover color?" the prosecutor asked. "I sent him notices." Karen protested. "About the pool being destroyed?" "Well, no, about the cover." "Did your HOA bylaws authorize you to destroy property?" "Not specifically, but..." "Yes or no, Mrs. Hutchinson?" "No," she admitted finally. The jury took less than 2 hours to find her guilty on all counts. Judge Watkins sentenced Karen to 3 years probation, $50,000 in restitution, and 500 hours of community service, specifically environmental cleanup work. "And Mrs. Hutchinson," the judge added, "you are prohibited from serving on any homeowners association during your probation period." Karen gasped as if she'd been sentenced to death. The civil suit was settled out of court. Between insurance and the settlements, I received enough to not only restore my pool but to upgrade my entire property. I added a hot tub, outdoor kitchen, and fancy lighting system that would have given the old Karen an aneurysm. Karen was forced to sell her house to pay legal fees and restitution. No one in the neighborhood offered to help her move. The HOA board was reshuffled after the scandal. To my surprise, I was nominated to join. I accepted on one condition, that the guidelines be completely rewritten for clarity and reasonableness. 6 months later, Sunshine Meadows had transformed. The revised HOA guidelines were just 10 pages long, focused on actual safety and property value issues rather than petty aesthetics. The board now had a system of checks and balances, with no single member able to issue violations without review. To celebrate the new era, I hosted a neighborhood pool party. Almost everyone came, swimming in my beautifully restored pool with its deliberately unauthorized aquamarine cover. Jeff raised a toast to Jim, who taught us all that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even ones with HOA clipboards. As for Karen, I heard she moved to a condominium complex in the next county. Rumor has it she's already fighting with the condo board about the thickness of their welcome mats. But the best part? Her new place doesn't allow pools of any kind. Sometimes justice isn't just served, it's served with a perfect splash.